Hey, my friends, welcome to another episode of Real Life Talk. Really super appreciate you guys so much for being here and checking out this conversation. Today's episode is going to be a discussion that is so near and dear to my heart. I'm so grateful to my guest for being here. Stacey Efaw has more than 20 years of leadership experience in the nonprofit sector and currently serves as the executive director of Selah Freedom, which is a faith-based nonprofit anti-human trafficking organization based in Florida and the Midwest with the mission to end sex trafficking and bring freedom to the exploited through awareness, prevention, outreach, residential, and organizational consulting. Again, appreciate you guys so much for joining me. Hope the content of this episode blesses you, challenges you, makes you think. If it does, if you consider subscribing or leaving a comment or a review on one of the podcast platforms, that would be absolutely amazing. And Stacey, I apologize because I forgot to ask before we started here. I don't know if I pronounced your last name correctly or not.
Yes, Efaw. Yes.
Okay. I was like 90% sure, but I meant to ask you that before we started, and I've
It's so simple, but everyone wants to make it harder.
Yeah, I tend to overcomplicate things unnecessarily. So
I do that too.
So would you share, as we get started here, Stacey, would you just talk a little bit about what brought you personally to this world of anti-human trafficking? How did this all kind of pan out for you? How did you get to be doing what you're doing today as the executive director of Selah Freedom?
My whole career has been in nonprofits. I started off, working as a director of a food pantry, and then I went on to help at the Humane Society and then Habitat for Humanity. So it's kind of been my career. And actually, a previous board member that I worked for sent me the job description and said, "I think you'd be perfect for this." And I read it, and I honestly put it aside for about 3 weeks because the mission is so tough. And I kind of had an idea of what I would be getting into, but I just kept feeling this tugging at my heart, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I went ahead and applied for the job and got the position and have absolutely loved it.
And how long have you been in the position you're in now?
2 years. I've been with Selah Freedom for 2 years. And It's been very eye-opening. There is a whole world that I did not know anything about. So I always tell people, not to feel bad if you don't know everything, because a lot of us don't know, because it's a world that we don't participate in. So how would you really know much about it unless you hear somebody speak?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that. And so let's start in kind of a broad, kind of a basic place. And I want to just ask you, if you could explain what exactly is human trafficking, because I think everybody probably listening to this has at least some idea of what that is. But the idea that a lot of people, I think, might have in their minds is probably something that maybe they've seen on a TV show or in a movie. Some sex trafficking ring is discovered or something like that, and it's like some big kind of crime syndicate related thing that's going on or something like that. But I think that the way that human trafficking is actually transpiring right under our noses a lot of times, all around us in every state in our country, and all around us really is not always the picture of what somebody might have. So would you kind of describe in your own words, like, what is human trafficking, and maybe give an idea of a little bit of the spectrum of what it actually looks like in our world today?
Yeah, human trafficking is more the broader term. So that includes labor trafficking and sex trafficking. So both of them. So for someone to be trafficked, you have to prove fraud, force, coercion, or exchange of money. So there is definitions that a police officer may have to go through with a victim to make sure they really have been trafficked, not doing things on their own free will. But yeah, human trafficking, it encompasses all forms of trafficking, where sex trafficking is just sexual exploitation, and then labor is just labor. So we actually help victims of both.
And what's like the more common form?
Our main mission really is sex trafficking. So that is what we tend to encounter the majority of the times. But there are times when we'll work with the police department on a prostitution sting, and we'll come in and raid a place, and they will actually have somebody there being forced to work there as well. You'll see these
Yeah.
often in, different types of establishments like the 24-hour massage parlors. You might have someone being trafficked up front as a receptionist, being forced to work there, and another person being trafficked in a sexual way in the back room. So
Wow.
there could be both in one place. So if
Wow.
we find victims, we're going to help all of them, but our main focus really is helping victims of sex trafficking.
Gotcha. Wow. So you mentioned that you've been with Selah for 2 years. It's been very exciting, as I'm sure we can imagine. What would you say is, like, something, or maybe one or two things that you've kind of, discovered being a part of this world that people might not be super aware of, something that might be surprising to find out about what this actually is, or something that's involved here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I learned so much. If I had to pick a couple items, it would be just how prevalent of a problem that it is. It's huge, and it's very organized systems of crime that control it, and also how prevalent it is in the United States. I don't know if you've seen the recent movie about freedom, and it's a great,
Yes.
great movie. I loved it. I'm so glad that it's being
Yeah.
out there,
Yeah,
getting
me too.
awareness. But it really focused on international trafficking, and we have just the exact same thing happening here in the U.S.
Mm.
So those are, yeah, the
And
prevalence of it and the fact that it's happening right here. And the labor trafficking, I often thought that was just, factories over in third world countries, but it's happening here too, which I didn't know.
yeah, no, it's really incredible to think about, right? And the example that you gave a minute ago about how it could be, somebody, receptionist at a store, not store, but the example you gave was massage parlor or something like
Yeah.
that.
The 24-hour
Somebody.
massage parlors.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
a particular kind of massage parlor, right? So so
Yeah.
the so the per so the it could be the person working in reception up there, and it's like, okay, so here's where my mind goes, excuse me. Um, how is that person in a scenario like that? How is that person? Obviously, they're not like being kept in a cage, or locked in a room. Maybe they are at night, I don't know, but I mean, during the time they're there as in that receptionist role. There's like a door that's opening and closing. Like, how are they staying there? Why are they staying there? I'm wondering, like, with the pervasiveness of this problem, and we'll get into some statistics and numbers and different things that are going on as we go forward in our discussion here. But with the pervasiveness of how this is going on, in all of our major cities, it's going on in smaller areas as well, but it's going on all over our country here in the US. Like, how does that continue? How does that person stay there and no one discovers that this person's actually being trafficked?
Well, traffickers are very controlling and manipulative. So it's almost like you ask, I often had the question too, why doesn't someone leave their abusive spouse? I always feel like if I was being physically beat, I would leave. But
Yeah.
the traffickers really is a lot of mind control. You get a lot of Stockholm syndrome happening. A lot of mind control, physical control. They control their money. It's basically they have ultimate control over that person, so much that the person is more fearful of the trafficker than fearful of what the acts the trafficker is making them do. And often they feel they
Wow.
can't leave, like they can't see a way out, or what would I do? The
Yeah.
threats that they give them are just horrible. They'll threaten them, they'll, physically beat them up, abuse them. Then they also threaten, if you leave, I'm going to do this to your sister, your brother. I know where your parents leave. There's a new tactic that some of them are doing, especially for the younger victims. They'll buy them a pet, a little dog or a little cat.
Oh,
And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they'll abuse the animal in front of them. So it is complete mind control. And again, also
yeah.
they control the money, they control, they make sure they know where they're at. And it's very hard for them to get out.
Wow. Related question. How how does this what's like a typical scenario for how this might start? How somebody might get swept up into this world of being trafficked either for labor exploitation or for, sexual exploitation. Is there a lot of just blatant like kidnapping type stuff that happens? Is it more of like a grooming process over a period of time? I know social media, of course, these days is very much involved in the process, but like paint a picture for like what's a typical scenario for how, let's just say a child or maybe adolescent or somebody like that might get swept up into this world.
Yeah, I'll talk about domestically in the US. Typically, what we've seen is the average age of somebody getting into sex trafficking, I lost my screen, sorry, is
Oh, you're okay.
12 to 14 years old. So typically it's early teenage years is when it starts to happen. And I would say a high percentage of them, not all of them, this is just, I'm saying a high percentage, are children that are from homes that maybe not are the best situations to be in. And also a lot of them in foster care. So the traffickers are very good at finding people that are vulnerable. If a kid's coming from a really good home with strong parents that he can or she can go talk to, the parents are involved, the parents are looking on the phone, like there's a family unit that's communicating, it's a little bit less likely. I'm not going to say it can't happen because it can. But you kind of see the same thing with drug use too. Any child can get caught up using drugs. But typically it's happening from a higher percentage of homes that are broken. So often these children are looking for love. They're looking for someone to like them. And the kidnapping off the street is a small percentage. It does happen. So I won't say don't, you've got to be aware, but that's a
Yeah.
smaller percentage. It's typically someone that the child knows. It can be a neighbor, an uncle, a friend, someone they meet online, but the person befriends them. And then that's when the whole grooming process starts. So it is a slow process, and the traffickers are very good at it, and they know how to make the person feel special, feel loved, and then it kind of goes from there. They start asking them to do things, and then they make them feel like they're, I'm your boyfriend, I'm going to take care of you, and they make a lot of promises, and then the situation changes.
Wow.
So it is, but they take their time in doing it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I found interesting as I've like looked into this more and more is that sometimes that can be a long process, right? And
Right.
it's like the commitment of these people to like put so much energy and all this effort and time and everything into emotionally and psychologically manipulating kids, and in some cases, young adults and I guess probably, people into their 20s and stuff like that as well, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
but this process of like this psychological manipulation to suck people in, as you said, I mean, it's such a heartbreaking thing to think about. It's like
It
these
is.
kids that are already from a broken home or from a situation where, as you said, they're looking for love. They're looking for some kind of belonging. They're looking for somewhere to belong. That's how we see kids, get swept up into gangs and things like that as well. So often it's like, oh, well, you might not have these connections in your life that are meaningful. So let me kind of draw you in by letting you feel like you're a part of something. We're going to offer you community. We're going to offer you maybe some money. We're going to offer you some things that you haven't been able to experience before. Before they know it, it just gets darker and darker and often becomes something that they're trapped in and would like to get out if they could, but don't know how. And just thinking about the level here of that just that level of manipulation and psychological abuse that goes on that would keep somebody staying somewhere when they probably, in some cases, they might be able to physically run away, but because of what's been because of that fear that really they've been manipulated with of something bad happening to them or to somebody that they love or to a pet. Oh my goodness, it's just it's unbelievable.
It is.
um
Yeah, I never knew that humans can do what they do to other people until I learned a lot more about this
Yeah.
industry, and it's very sad. But
Yeah.
that's the tough part of the job, I have to say.
Yeah, and I did see the movie Sound of Freedom. I've been talking about it as much as I can, because I want people to
Highly
get out there and
recommend
see
it.
it.
Yes.
It's so good
Yes.
because I think what it does is it in a dramatized way that can be, there's an entertainment aspect to it. It's a very well done movie. It stands up, right? Like, even if it
Right.
wasn't a true story, like, it would stand up as a movie where you would say, "Wow, this is interesting." That there's some, dark aspects of it where I think they do a very good job of really showing you, like,
Right.
without becoming sexually explicit, in a movie, because we're dealing with kids in the movie. So without become doing it in a way that would make it impossible for people to go and watch, I think they do
Yes.
a very good job of kind of taking you to that line and making it very, very clear, like, this is what this is. This is how dark this is. This is how, grotesque this is. And I think because it's in a movie, that it gives us opportunity to get out and see it together in community. And I think that there's something so valuable about that in terms of raising awareness and stuff like that, because again, I think a lot of this stuff, even that you've already mentioned, it's unknown to a lot of people.
Yes. It has brought in a lot of awareness. We've gotten a lot of calls, emails, people wanting to help out now. So it's really, we're so grateful they did the movie.
Yeah.
It is a tough topic. Sometimes I don't like people to ask me what I do for a living because you see their face immediately, like, oh, I don't want to hear about that. And I get it. A few years ago, I didn't want to hear about it, but now I've learned so much about it. I've become so passionate that I want to help, and I've seen the success that we've had with victims at Selah Freedom, and that's what really keeps me going. So that is the bright side. And then, we do a lot with the prevention of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about what Selah Freedom does, and yeah, because that was one of the questions I had too. It's like, man, like, to be involved in this and to be kind of around this stuff, to hear these stories and to see the hurt and the pain, and to know that there's even, so much more going on. It's like, that's got to be so heart wrenching. But it's the other aspect of it, right? It's the aspect of, we know that we're making a difference. We can see the difference, that people are being rescued, people are being freed, and people are not just getting, like, out, but they're actually being, rehabilitated and restored and walking through a process of healing. Would you talk a little bit about what you all do? Because I know there's stuff on the prevention end, the educational side, raising awareness and all of that, but then, of course, the actual nitty gritty of pulling people out and putting them through a process of education and healing. So would you talk about the just kind of the spectrum of what you guys do?
Yeah, the prevention side really is working with the youth and parents and people that work with youth, and we educate them. And really, what we try to do is arm the children with knowledge and what to do if they are in a situation where they're uncomfortable, because often these children are being approached by an adult that they trust. And that's what's even more difficult. If you're
Mm,
approached by a scary, mean-looking stranger in the park, you know to run. But when it's your
yeah.
neighbor, it's a little bit more difficult. So we have curriculum from kindergarten through college, and of course it's age appropriate curriculum where we just teach children on, appropriate relationships, starting in elementary school, like body parts, bathing suit areas, difference between a secret and a surprise. What is it?
Mm,
What's good? What,
wow.
if you're being told not to tell your mom something, it's probably not a good thing. Identifying 3 safe adults that they can go to if something happens. I read a report, and this report was put together, anybody can find it, by the US Department of Education. It's from 2010. And it said by the time a child gets from kindergarten through 12th grade in the public school system, they will be approached by at least one school employee for a sexual relationship. I thought, the school department
Wow.
knows and that's a 13-year-old study. So the chances are your child's going to be approached by somebody. So teaching them what to do if they're in that situation, and then also teaching parents how to build that relationship where the child is not ashamed and they feel they can come talk to the parents. Because you'll see, there was a situation in another county. A little girl was lured from a birthday party by a neighbor. She was 6 years old, and he brought her to his house during a birthday party and sexually molested her, made her watch videos, took her back to the party. Well, when her mom picked her up, she told her mom. So the police were called, thank goodness. But when they went to his house, they found he had done this to hundreds of children. So why do those hundreds of children not speak up? So what can you do with your own child to build that relationship that if something does happen to them, that they're not ashamed, they know it's not their fault, and that they feel like they can come talk to you. So that's why we try to work with parents and kids, how to react if this does happen to your kid. Because I know my reaction would be probably want to go, strangle the person, but what to do if it does happen. So that's really on the preventative side. And then we do a lot of work. We have a couple, I'm not sure if you can see me. I don't know why my own camera keeps going in and out. Can you see me?
No, everything looks fine on my end.
Okay, because I can't see you, so I'll just keep talking. Hopefully it comes back.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on, but I'm good. I can see you and hear you perfectly.
Okay, so so that's kind of what we do with the elementary school, and with people that work with the youth. We try to ask, have them identify warning signs that a child might be being, molested or abused or trafficked. So those are some of the things that we focus on, the prevention. And then also having just a lot of free education on our websites people can go to and watch. And then we do a lot of in-person trainings.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
What would you say is I don't know if these are hard and fast numbers or just a speculation, but the ratio between girls and boys, as far as I've always heard that it's, more girls that are trafficked than boys. One of the things though that I found, I thought was really, I just thought it was great that the way they did it in the movie in Sound of Freedom was they showed both. And they really showed, they kind of really focused in on some of the little boys, because I think that in our minds, we're more maybe conditioned just to think that our girls are more at risk. And that may be the case. I feel like I'm sure the numbers are probably still more heavily swayed that way. But I thought that was something really powerful that the movie did, that they actually focused on both sides of the equation there. So what is kind of what have you seen in terms of how much on either side there?
I don't have a hard statistic, but I do know that often the boys, it goes unreported. A lot of boys deal with a lot of shame, more shame. I mean, the girls deal with shame as well. But they're less likely to report it happening than a girl is. So I think the movie was so good because I feel like sometimes parents with little boys don't worry as much. Like you said, we tend to worry about girls, and even teenage boys. We think, oh, they're strong, they can take care of themselves, and maybe physically they can, but mentally they're still able to be manipulated. So I love that the movie brought that aspect out. On our side, from what we deal with, is probably, more 90% women and 10% men. But again, I feel like it's just so underreported. They just don't report what's happening to them. It's kind of the same with domestic violence too. A lot of men won't report if they're being abused, physically, domestically.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they
That's
deal
true.
with a lot of shame.
Are you aware of any kind of a difference in the psychological manipulation that would take place between, is it different in the way that a predator would go after a little girl or a teenage girl as opposed to a teenage boy or something like that? Like, is there a different mechanism in place as far as just even psychologically in what I guess what I'm thinking about is where the vulnerability might be, and would you say that they're pretty much the same, or are there differences there that would maybe put a young girl more at risk as opposed to a young boy or something like that?
With a lot of the girls that we've dealt with, they're looking more for love. And the boys, it might be more like a friendship, like a pal, but ultimately it's love to attention. Very similar tactics, but I mean, I'm sure the trafficker adjusts to whatever is going to get that person, but
Mm,
it's still a lot of the same mental stuff that they do, regardless.
wow. Man,
I know
it's
it's a
so
tough topic.
it's just so heavy. It's just so heavy. But no, I mean, I appreciate this so much. I appreciate so much what you do and what your organization does. Because obviously this is such a pervasive problem. I mean, they bring out these statistics in the movie, right? Of and you can, we can look these up other places too, but $160 billion a year industry.
Yeah.
They say 2 million is like the number that they're aware of, I guess, or their
Right.
closest estimate based on what they know. But 2 million just kids a year being pulled into this. And so on that, I've been thinking a lot about the supply versus demand aspect of this, right? Because
Mhm.
this is only growing as it's growing, and getting to the point of like essentially rivaling the drug trade as far as illegal criminal activity that goes on our planet. It's becoming so much more pervasive, and there's more going on because there must be a demand increasing. And I don't know, like, what do we attribute that to? Do you have any
I think
any
it's
thoughts there? I mean,
I think just also we're becoming more aware of it. I think the
yeah.
internet has definitely made it more prevalent and easier to, um, I want to say, to make the act happen, because they place ads online where before you would have to like know somebody who knew somebody, and now you can
Mm,
just search online and figure it out. So I think it's just a little bit more easily available, which internet has good things but also not good things. And I think just our awareness is increasing. But no, I agree with you. I didn't hear about this growing up. If you heard it maybe happening something to one child that you knew growing up, and that might have been it. But now it seems to be just a
yeah.
lot more prevalent. And I don't have a ton of answers for that one.
No, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, how could you, right? It's
Right.
but yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, so we're talking, I'm 37, I think. So not even 30 years ago, when I'm a kid and I'm, 10 years old, 12 years old, and I'm leaving the house and riding my bike for miles, and I'm, going to friends' houses without parental supervision, and walking to the park and walking to the store to buy a soda and candy or whatever. Like, it wasn't a thing. But these are things that now, like with my kids, I have a 12-year-old and a 12-year-old boy and an 8-year-old boy. And with them, there's like this protective thing in me because it's just I'm so much more aware of stuff that's going on in the world, and I don't want to shelter them. Like, I don't want to not let them do fun stuff and not let them have some freedom as they're becoming more
Right.
mature and as they're growing up and,
Right.
and earning things. Of course, I don't want to be stupid about it either, but like, I don't want to shelter. I think when we shelter our kids, that often has the opposite effect as they get a little bit older and they discover how to, maybe get some freedom on their own without permission. Then rebellion becomes a real big deal. But
Okay.
I don't know. So like, what is this all stuff that you would talk about, like, in the preventative kind of awareness type side of
Yeah.
things, like as far as helping parents to kind of navigate? I'm sure some of this depends too on where you live and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, what are some things that kind of go into that could just help, me, for example, as a parent of some, kids that are coming into that, adolescent age and all that kind of stuff where, like, there's stuff that they need to be aware of. Like, what are some things that might be helpful just from the parent to child kind of dynamic to help them? You mentioned some things already, I guess, but
Yeah, well, we did about the open communication and just discussing this with your child. It's an uncomfortable topic, but bringing it up so that they're going to probably be squirming as you're talking about it, but at least they know, okay, dad knows this could happen if I'm ever in this position. I'm supposed to call dad. Like, I mean, it's better to talk about it, right? Other
yeah.
things like I read an interview by a trafficker and I found it interesting. And he approached all of his victims online, And his victims were children and adults. They often don't just go after children, often adults
Gotcha.
too. But he said with children, one of the first questions he'll ask is, does your mom or dad get on your phone or computer? And if they go, yeah, my mom's always on my phone, she's so annoying, he stops talking to them. So just a simple act of getting on your kid's phone and going through it, whether you know what you're doing or not, and it drives the kids crazy, but at least they kind of have a feeling, oh, I can't hide things on my phone. My mom's or dad's going to go through it, or I can't hide things on my computer. Unfortunately, they come through the video games too. Like we had 2 teenage boys that were trafficked through Fortnite. They were found over in St. Petersburg in a trailer park. And so Fortnite, I mean, it's a video game, but just talking to your children. And I know we all say stranger danger and this and that, but it's that person they're talking to on the game that they play with weeks after week that they're building that relationship with. Those are almost more the ones you got to worry about. And, just educating them about it, having them watch some of our trainings online. We go to the schools and do it, but I think it's important for parents to, take some of the responsibility too on their own and help teach their kids about it.
Yeah, that's really
And then,
good.
but give them freedom too. I agree. Like, you don't want them to grow up in a box, but I think, educating them is the best thing you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I love, you kind of talked about, I don't know if you use this terminology or not, but you mentioned some like helping them develop like situational awareness, like that kind of thing where, like being aware of like, my wife has been doing this with our boys lately, is like when we go somewhere, she'll pause and she'll ask them some questions to just try to like become aware, like, hey, listen, like pay attention, like when we go somewhere, like we're walking around the mall or we're doing something, it's like pay attention to what mom is wearing, pay attention to what dad is wearing, make sure like our phone numbers just in case you get lost or something like
Right.
that. But like
Yeah.
it's kind of like situational awareness type things of knowing, like this is something I do. It's kind of like knowing like knowing where the
Hey,
exits are, knowing where the escape routes
hey.
are, knowing like different things, you know what I'm saying?
I don't blame you. It's probably really good things to know nowadays. It has become a
Yeah.
slightly crazy world.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just but again, like it's not about living in fear though, right? It's
No,
about yeah.
nowhere,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
nowhere.
Man, I had another question that I wanted to ask you, and I'm kind of blanking on what it
And you
was.
had asked about our programming, like I don't know if you want to jump into that, like what we do with the survivors, as far as
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, how does that work? Because obviously that's such an important aspect. I mean, you mentioned one of the things you mentioned there is the shame that people come under, and it's such a twisted just mechanism and I think scheme of the devil to like try to with anything to try to like keep us in bondage through shame and through fear, and that's what it does. That's the nature of this, because it's such a dark thing, and that's the nature of darkness, is that it like wants to stay in the dark. And so shame becomes this thing that's like, if you're under enough shame, you don't want anybody to know. And so you kind of you stick with it, you keep going through it. And that often can be something that can be very, not difficult for God, but I mean, but difficult for a human to
Yes.
process and to really have that unraveled in their life, especially if it's gone on for an extended period of time. So yeah, I'm very curious to know about like your process for helping people to come to that place of freedom.
Shame and that feeling of unworthiness, that they don't feel like they deserve any better. One
Yeah.
thing we have found so far with the over 6,000 victims that we have worked with is the vast majority of them have a history of sexual abuse as a child. So most of them have become abused at an early age sexually by somebody. And
Wow.
that right there put that root of shame in them, and it made
Wow.
them more vulnerable. It's very damaging to a person. So one thing that I love that Selah Freedom does is it really we start with therapy, with, trauma. We start with a lot of trauma therapy, but we do a
Mhm.
lot of therapy around sexual abuse and getting to that root feeling of shame. Because we've from interviewing people that maybe get rescued from or get out of trafficking and they go back in, it's often because they haven't dealt with that shame, that root cause that's allowing them to let people control them. So we do a lot of that, working around the trauma that they feel because of the sexual abuse. And I think that's one of the things that really needs to be done to anybody who's gone through any sort of sexual abuse. And then we
Wow.
help, also most of them come with a drug addiction, because that's another thing the traffickers do, is they try very hard to get them hooked on some sort of substance, because that's
Mhm.
another way they can control them.
Control
And
them.
and then the victims are willingly taking the substance because it's probably a lot easier to go through what they're going to go through if they're not
Mhm.
really feeling it all emotionally, and they become numb because they're under the influence. So we do a lot with trauma therapy, mental health counseling, and drug addiction. So that's kind of where we start, because you got to get somebody somewhat stabilized. And then our program goes up to 2 years. And then after they graduate our program, they're allowed to stay with us continuously through our mentorship program. So we work on everything from life skills. If you think about, if they were in trafficking as a teenager, and the average time in the life of trafficking is 7 years. So by the time we often get in touch with them, they're in their early 20s. So think about what you learn from your teenage years to your early 20s. You normally learn how to drive, you learn how to cook, you learn,
Yeah.
basic budgeting. So we are basically starting from scratch with a lot of them. I mean, a lot of them have really good survival skills, I'll say that, and they're
Mhm.
very resourceful. But a lot of them don't have a driver's license. So we work with them on driver's license, budgeting, cleaning.
Yeah.
And then we go on to employment skills. We'll actually do a lot of career testing with them and decide what do they want to do. We do try to encourage everyone to get their GED. And we have quite a few residents right now working on their GED. And then from there we go, do you want to go to tech school? Do you want to go to college? And we'll help them, whatever they want to do, we will help make their dream come true. And that's what I love. We're giving them a chance to have another life.
Wow.
Yep.
That's
It's the
incredible.
life they wanted, not the life that was kind of thrown upon them.
Wow. That's so amazing. That's so
Yeah,
amazing, man.
it is.
The
And we have a girl right now just got accepted into engineering college. So,
wow.
and just so many stories of, people going from being arrested 17, 18, 40 times, and now they've got, they own a home, they're taxpayers, they're just, you could do a
Yeah.
complete turnaround on somebody with help.
Yeah. Man, that's so awesome. Uh, what would you say? And I mean, not necessarily specifically for Selah, but in general. I don't know if this is, again, this might be a just a speculation. I don't know, but what would you say as far as you mentioned people that come out of human trafficking and then end up going back into it? Would you say is that like a high percentage of people that end up falling back into it, or do you think that's a relatively low number?
Without
Um,
without proper programming, they're going to go back into it. Same with drugs. It's very hard to cycle to
yeah,
break because they're not getting to that root cause of their unworthiness, their
mm,
feeling of unworthiness. Let me correct myself. So
sure.
if you can't correct that, we had one girl and she went through drug court, I think 12 times. So she went programming 12 times, and she said she just kept going back, going back. Wasn't until she got to Selah and got the therapy around the sexual abuse that then she was able to get out of it. And I'm not saying Selah is the only answer, but going through some sort of programming to help get to that root cause, and
Yeah.
dealing with that trauma that they experience, because our brain will keep reliving the trauma and keep making us feel like we're unworthy. So we try to get them past that.
Yeah, so really it's like dealing with it's getting to that those root kind of identity issues, right? Of somebody remembering or coming to that place of understanding of who they are, of like the worthiness, the dignity that they have, the value that they that their life is. Because I mean, you think about, especially if you are swept up into this as a kid, and you're or kid, teenager, whatever, but you're sold to other people for their, whether we're talking about sexual purposes or for, forced labor or what it is. But I mean, you're being sold to other people. That, I mean, what does that do to you in terms of like the value? Like, you got to feel like you're not worth anything. Like, if this is if you're basing the value of your life on the actions of what people are doing to you. So I can totally see that, where, that you would need that I restoration of identity, and the way that you can, see yourself, and that value that you can begin to place on your own life, so that you can consistently to walk in freedom, to recognize, like, I'm never going back to this, because that's not who I am. That's not, what defines me.
Yeah.
You know?
They create a whole new identity,
Yeah.
which is wonderful when it happens. It's a beautiful
Yeah.
transition.
Yeah. One of the other things that was disturbing to me, and I don't remember if this was from the movie or somewhere else, but I've heard recently that it's something like 90% of prostitution is human trap, like, is so if we yeah so like 90% of prostitutes are being trafficked.
Yes, they're being
Is
forced.
that
Yes, it's
um
true. Yep, I've heard between 85 and 90%, so I'm sure it's kind of hard to
mhm,
get an exact statistic, but
yeah,
yes, and we do a lot of education around that, and we even go in, especially the high school and college students. I mean, we try to teach them about prostitution, and a lot of people think it's victimless, like, oh, I'm paying for it.
yeah, right.
This person must want this. I'm helping them pay their bills. They want this. Um, this is just a business transaction.
Mhm.
Looking at some of the situations and seeing some of the where police things are held and all, I don't know how people can really believe all of that, but I do understand the concept that in society, a lot of us feel like prostitution is kind of victimless, that they're just, exchanging
Yeah.
money for something. But that's what we do a lot of education around. So we go into high schools and colleges and tell them, like, look, when you go to college and the group says, hey, let's get a hooker or whatever, and educate them on how these people are being forced to do this. And
Yeah.
often 15 up to 40 times in a day. Like, you're not one person. So educating the general public, I think, helps. There are a lot of programs right now, buyer reform programs, that are helping to reform and educate buyers of sex who often have a sex addiction. So that's a whole other
Mm,
side that we don't
yeah.
deal with, but I'm very glad that somebody is dealing with that.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so I think that does help, letting people understand that they're not doing this by choice. Very
I
few
would
people.
hope
Yes,
I would
very few
hope that
people
the
would want.
I would hope that the average person that maybe has that mindset, like, "Oh, I'm just, I'm paying for sex, it's victimless, I'm an adult. Hopefully this, person is an adult," or whatever. But, like, someone that might think that way, that
Right.
hopefully, if they were to, see behind that curtain and recognize, like, no, this person is doing this against their will, like, they're being forced into this. They're a slave.
Mm-hmm.
They're a modern day slave, and, like, you're participating in this. That's where, like, a lot of this, it's like the participation in it. The other part of this, and this is probably the last question that we're going to have time for. I did want to ask you about the connection between human trafficking and the pornography industry, because that's like an area that, it's like, I feel like those two worlds are so closely related, and maybe you can shed some more, light on that. But that's an area where there is a lot of participation by I mean, millions and millions of people in this country that participate in, pornography in different ways. And that it seems like that's a big arm of this too, right? That it's like propping up this sex trade industry in a lot of different ways. Is that accurate, or what would
Yeah,
you say about that?
I was surprised to learn how close pornography and strip clubs are tied to the
Mm,
trafficking industry. A lot of times with their traffickers, that's how they'll start. They start forcing the victims to do pornography or strip, one or the other,
Okay.
to bring money in. And then it slowly works up to actual sexual acts. So there is a lot of people being forced to take photos of themselves, or coerced to take photos of themselves, or film. And then also stripping. I thought all strippers just did that because they wanted to, but I had no idea that people were being forced to get up there to earn money, but they are. So I think consumers of both should be aware that, the person you're watching may be being beaten if they don't bring in enough money. Like it's not might take away some of the excitement for the consumer. And if you can stop the flow of money, then the whole industry will stop, because
Yeah.
that's why people are doing,
Yeah, that's what it's
that's
about,
fueling
right?
it, fueling a lot of
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's a thing too that I wasn't super aware of that either, really, till you said it just now, of like strip clubs and that aspect of it. And it's like, yeah, it's like that it's like the participation in this stuff is, I can't imagine it would be at the same extent that it is now if there was, really this blanket awareness of the darkness that is really all about this. And so that's
Right.
why I appreciate so much what organizations like Selah Freedom is doing. And of course, we talked about the movie Sound of Freedom, and there's others. I mean, so many others out there that are just like really on the front lines of this issue. And I'm just so appreciative, Stacey, for you, for your time, for your leadership in this, for your organization, and what you guys are doing to raise this awareness. Because again, this is a problem that exists and is allowed to thrive because so much of it is still going on in darkness. And so I think the more that we can have conversations like this and shed as much light on this as possible, then I think that it's at least a step in the right direction.
Agree. And thank you for having us on. It's podcasts like this that help us get the news out. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really
Before I
do.
let you go, would you share just briefly about maybe just your website, or point people to where they could go to find out some
Yeah.
more about what you guys do? Maybe somebody out there is inspired to lend some financial support or something like that. Where
Would
could
be
they go to
wonderful.
find out more? Yeah.
Wonderful. It's Selah Freedom, SelahFreedom.com. And yes, any amount of support is appreciated. We have our fundraiser coming up. That's in the Tampa and Sarasota area. That's this fall. We have an Angels Club, which starts at like $15 a month. If that's what you can do, we'd be so thankful for that too. Or if you want to do 15,000, we'd be thankful for that as well.
Yeah.
But
Come on.
anything. We've launched a new Freedom T-shirt. So you can go on to our store and buy merchandise that helps, helps bring in funds too, but also spreads awareness. And then if anybody wants to volunteer, we always are looking for volunteers if you're in the Sarasota area.
Awesome. So good. I appreciate it very much, Stacey.
Thank
Thank you again
you.
for your time.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for checking out this episode. Appreciate you guys as well. If you haven't seen the movie Sound of Freedom, get out there and see it. And I would just encourage you so much, especially if the Lord is, you feel like some kind of tug at your heart right now. Let it move you to action. Even if it's just in the form of talking about it more, getting more educated on this, if it's lending support, if it's boots on the ground, whatever it might be. But this is a problem that's so pervasive in our world today. It seems to be expanding and getting worse. But the way that stops is when we shine light in dark places. So however you'd be led to do that, I just encourage you so much to just get involved. And appreciate you guys again. Thanks so much. And I'll see you next time. God bless.